Funding for Frontline is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Tonight, on Frontline, the national crusade to keep kids away from drugs and alcohol.
We are aware, we do know what goes on, and we're not going to sit with our head in the sands or say, gee, I wish this would go away.
From elementary school to high school, can drug use be prevented?
The more they tell us not to do it, the more we're going to do it.
And how many kids really use drugs?
There are even some kids in my school that get great grades and they do cocaine.
Tonight, Stopping Drugs, Part 2.
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is Frontline with Judy Woodruff.
Good evening. Tonight on Frontline, the second in our two-part special, Stopping Drugs. Last week, we witnessed the personal challenge of kicking drugs. Tonight, we explore the challenge of keeping our children off them. As a nation, we are spending over $250 million on drug education and prevention. Are we getting our money's worth? Frontline producer Andrew Liebman set out to answer that question last fall after President Reagan declared war on drugs. Here is his report.
The House come to order, please. We all know why we're here. It's time to declare an all-out war, to mobilize our forces, public and private, national and local, in a total coordinated assault upon this menace, which is draining our economy of some $230 billion.
The war on drugs, in 1986, America's #1 concern. In an election year, the enemy is everywhere. The familiar images of the war fill television screens and magazines. The traditional strategy for stopping drug use, intercepting drugs before they reach the customer, is escalated by Congress. Nearly $1 billion for extra law enforcement and the destruction of drug crops at their source. Then, amid a growing perception that the war is being lost, despite escalating the battle against drug suppliers, a new strategy, one aimed now at drug users.
All the confiscation and law enforcement of the world will not cure this plague as long as it is kept alive by public acquiescence. So we must now go beyond efforts aimed only at affecting the supply of drugs. We must affect not only supply, but demand. I believe we've come to a time when the American people are willing to make it clear that illegal drug and alcohol use will no longer be tolerated. So, starting today, Nancy's crusade to deprive the drug peddlers and suppliers of their customers becomes America's crusade.
America's new crusade was born not in the White House, but in communities like this, East Greenwich, Rhode Island. And it's here at a high school dance that Frontline begins its report on how the crusade is being fought. East Greenwich is white, wealthy, suburban. Here, as in similar communities across the country, the most popular drug isn't cocaine or marijuana, but alcohol. Nationwide, cocaine is only used often by 1 in 250 high school seniors, marijuana by 1 in 20. Alcohol, which can be as destructive as cocaine, gets 50% of high school seniors drunk every other week. But it's preventing the use of all drugs, including alcohol, that's the goal of the new crusade. Gillette Hunt is one of the leaders of the crusade. The mother of 2 teenage children, she's here to help enforce a Get Tough policy on students using drugs and drinking.
Are you looking for someone? Hi. Okay. Well, you can't, once you're out of the dance or haven't been at the dance, then you can't come in.
We are aware, we do know what goes on, and we're not going to sit with our head in the sands or say, gee, I wish this would go away. We're going to act on it and be responsible for ourselves and for our own kids.
While the students dance, East Greenwich Police, the school principal, and the town drug counselor inspect their cars outside, looking for signs of drugs and alcohol.
There's a couple pours. They're crazy. Cars are going to go home no matter what.
Now it's at the northbound.
The policy was promoted by a parents group Gillette Hunt belongs to, East Greenwich Citizens Who Care.
See the can? It's a can. Diet Pepsi's the same way, though. Well, we know that, but it's I'm just saying. Yeah, you have to. In the back seat of the car, he found the plastic that holds together a six-pack of beer, and he can see the shape of the six-pack in that backpack in the front seat. So that's probable cause for him to check this car when it leaves. Look, there's about this much of it in the... They've got that. They'll probably have more on them anyway. That's all you need. That's definitely a roach. Yeah. There's no question about it. I hate to say. We'll stop the car when somebody gets in and moves it, and check it out. Just go in the ashtray and make sure that's what it is, and then we'll arrest him.
By night's end, 10 students will be arrested, a victory for East Greenwich Citizens Who Care and its policy of vigilance.
I was chaperoning a dance at the high school, and I watched a parent drive up to the high school, drop off about 5 kids. I think there were 3 girls and a couple of boys, and I watched the kids walk right up to the high school. The parent pulled away, and the kids kept right on going. And I don't know where they went. They never came into the dance, and I really...
For Citizens Who Care, which is trying to organize the whole community around the drug issue, getting parents to support searching cars is easy. But it's harder to convince parents to be firm about their children's drinking at home, in part because of ambivalence about whether alcohol is the same as other drugs.
I mean, are we going to sit here and all say that no one should be drinking ever, forever, and it should be outlawed? And, you know, we also have to teach the kids to use, if they're going to enjoy it sometime. And I'm not saying that 12 and 14 is the time to do that, but...
Let's say that your son comes home and tells you that he really wonders what it would be like to rob a store. Are you going to give him a gun, send him off down to the local grocery market?
But that's not wait a minute now. But wait a minute. Legal for him.
But wait a minute. Well, we're talking about right now at 14. It is not legal for him now. It is breaking a law. It's the same thing. I'm not saying at 21 it won't be legal. I'm just saying right now.
Doesn't matter. That's because I couldn't read you.
Gillette Hunt and the 60 families of Citizens Who Care are taking steps to make sure any parties their children attend are properly supervised to prevent drinking and drug use.
If my daughter were to tell me that she were going to Jane's house for a party, they were going to be there from 7 to 11, I would say fine. The next step is I would call Jane's house, chat with her mom, make sure her mother was going to be there. Point blank, I would ask, are you or your husband going to be around during the party?
Not surprisingly, many of the students at East Greenwich High find flaws in parents' plans to monitor their whereabouts. Nicole Anderson.
I think it will make kids not say where they're going. And they'll go someplace. Where are you going? I'm going to the movies, then out to dinner, and then that gives you up until 12 o'clock to have a party. So, I mean, it may work for some kids that say, all right, I'm going to so-and-so's house, and their parents will call, but I think it would make more kids go away from telling the truth to their parents.
When you were a kid, didn't your mother ever tell you not to do something, then you turned around and went and did it? The more they tell us not to do it, the more we're going to do it.
The traditional opportunity for unsupervised parties is when parents go out of town. To block this teenage tactic, Citizens Who Care has worked out an unusual procedure with the local police.
All right, Trudy, how long are you going to be going away?
We're going to be gone for a week, and I will be leaving my son home.
How old is your son?
He's 16.
16.
Yes.
And he understands that you've given us permission to enter the home.
Yes, I explained to him that I do trust him, that he will not have a party. However, when friends find out the parents are away, I know for a fact that they are going to come over.
It's happened quite a few times.
Well, it's happened quite often in our neighborhood.
Before you sign this permission to search form with Marcia, we want to make sure that you understand that you're actually signing away all your rights of search and seizure. In other words, you're going to give the police department a waiver saying that at any time when we feel it's necessary, we can enter your home. It's just like a search warrant to us. All right, now you have to sign the top, fill out the address.
So far, 14 families have signed permission to search agreements, and 4 children were arrested at a raided party. But the new Get Tough policy is battling a potent force, the belief of many teenagers that there's nothing wrong with drugs or alcohol. Nicole Anderson.
The parents in the community think that if you drink, you cannot possibly be a normal kid. I drank often. I get good grades. I'm vice president of my class. I'm an editor of my high school yearbook. I'm on student council. And I can't see how the parents think if I drink, I'm bad. I'm college bound. I want to go to a good school. I have a career in mind. I don't think because I drank it's going to get in my way of any of it. A lot of my friends drink, and they're the same thing. They all can have good standing in school and do drugs. There are even some kids in my school that get great grades, and they do cocaine. And how can you say that everyone's bad? Because, no, it's wrong. They're wrong.
For Gillette Hunt, this acceptance by today's teenagers that drug use is normal is the real enemy.
When I was growing up, in my class, in my group of friends, there was one young man that I know of that drank, and that was it. The normal way of life was to be drug-free. Over the past 20-some years, this has changed completely, where the normal way of life is to be the drinker or the user of drugs. Right now, the atmosphere is such that if you are drug-free, you're odd, you're weird, you're on the outside. And I think what our intent and our goal is really is to turn all of that around so that by the time kids get to high school, the person who is drinking and using drugs is the person who is abnormal and weird.
Turning around what's abnormal and weird is complicated by over a decade of popular culture that has portrayed student drinking as not just normal, but an essential rite of passage and acceptance, as in John Belushi's 1978 movie Animal House.
Grab a brew. Don't cost nothing.
More recently, the film The Breakfast Club showed a group of students who could get along with each other and have fun only after smoking marijuana. These images have reflected and reinforced the notion that drug experimentation is a valuable, even necessary, part of growing up.
Most people, they can't do things that they can when they're sober, so they get drunk to do it.
Alcohol goes with parties because so you can loosen up and meet new people and you won't feel embarrassed.
I can handle it maybe 25% of the time. 75% of the time after that, if I'm going to go out to drink, I'm going to go out to get smashed. And that's all it is.
As in any community, there are teenagers in East Greenwich whose instincts are to reject drug and alcohol use. But in a culture where drinking is the norm, kids often find it hard to resist the pressures to go along. These teenagers have formed a group to help them resist the pressure.
There's a lot of pressure, I think, because these people who do drugs and alcohol, they think, oh, well, this person doesn't do this kind of thing, so, he's probably, really weird or whatever.
Like, if everyone rejected you, you wouldn't have any feeling. You would just feel lost, and then I think that you might turn saying, well, I really need friends, because you do need friends. And so I think they might, if you didn't have anyone, I think you might turn to drugs just to be accepted or something.
Being in a group, just, you look around and you see, these are my friends, and they don't do this either. And I don't have to go alone to a party and feel totally out of place because I know that 3 of my other friends are going to be there, and they're not, together we won't feel out of place.
Our group is sort of students opposed to drug and alcohol. The purpose of this group, I think, this is my personal opinion, is we're trying to say to kids in elementary schools, junior high, and high school, it's okay not to drink and use drugs.
The question now is deciding how we're going to spend our time.
Gillette Hunt and Citizens Who Care actively support the SODA group. Most of SODA's members are girls, representing about 5% of East Greenwich High's 700 students. But SODA and its advisors believe that by sponsoring activities, the group's popularity will grow.
We're going to be having the Trash Bash, okay? Trash Bash is basically a community effort where a bunch of people are going to get together, go around and cleaning up the community. The Fun Run is going to be November 2nd. It's the following week. It's on a Sunday.
We're going to have a great hug-in at the high school, okay? And we're going to have a big banner. In other words, we'll make arrangements the Sunday before the week we do it. We'll come over and hang up a big banner that'll have this same little logo of the Bears. It'll say, "Hugs, not drugs." Then you'll all be armed with buttons. And the whole idea is that you'll be wearing yours when you start the day, that Monday. You go up and give somebody a hug, you give them a button, and you give them one more to pass on. So we'll see how many people can end up hugged by the end of the day and everybody wearing a button. 1, 2, 3, hugs, not drugs!
The buttons and the hugs prove popular. SODA gets better known. Whether it's changing kids' attitudes is another question.
Maybe it'll influence some people, but if they don't want to do drugs, that's their decision. I don't think they should be trying to make other people's decisions for them.
We don't go around and say, let's do drugs. We don't force our ideas of doing, drinking, and drugs.
That says, do drugs, no
Yeah, we don't run. So why should they tell us not to do something?
Do drugs.
I don't think that's right.
All those groups against drug abuse and alcohol abuse are sitting there talking about how other people, the drug users and the alcoholics, the drinkers, are pressuring people that don't do it to do it. But actually, it's them that are pressuring us.
I feel like the other students, let's say, who are part of the party crowd, the drinking crew, are beginning to get a little on edge about that, a little nervous about that, maybe beginning to feel self-conscious, because now there are just perhaps as many people thinking you can have a good time and being drug-free and being part of those activities as perhaps in the past where there were kids who mostly drank and went to those types of parties where no parents were home. And so as they begin to feel a little threatened, these kids who are the partiers and the drinkers, by the kids who are not using drugs, it creates a little bit of tension.
The battle for the hearts and minds of the students at East Greenwich High is a crucial one in the new crusade against drug and alcohol use. It represents a conscious attempt to return the community to the values of an earlier age. And in this attempt, Gillette Hunt and East Greenwich Citizens Who Care are part of a national movement, the National Federation of Parents for Drug-Free Youth. The Federation and two similar organizations were influential in getting Congress to allocate $250 million a year for extra drug prevention and education efforts. And Nancy Reagan has been influential in directing some of this federal money to the activist parent groups represented here.
As leaders in our efforts, you're the beacon for all the parents everywhere, showing them they can save their children. You are the symbol of help and hope, and you can't let up now. It's essential that you set the tone for other parents by creating an intolerant attitude about drugs in this country. And it's essential that you push the issue to the point of making people very, very uncomfortable.
This activist stance reflects the views of the Parents Federation and is evidence of the close ties between the parent movement and the government's drug prevention strategy. In fact, a former board member of the Parents Federation now heads the government super agency that controls all drug and alcohol abuse funds, pediatrician Dr. Ian McDonald.
I think that the parent movement and Nancy Reagan's involvement and her saying things like, unless you have an actively hostile position against drug use, you give tacit approval. That's important. What that basically says is that as a society, I don't think we can afford to take a neutral position. We're either for drug use or we're against it.
Punky and her sidekick are pressured to try drugs to join an older girls' club. Instead, Punky announces they'll form a club of their own.
It's called the Just Say No Club.
15,000 Just Say No clubs across America. The theory behind these clubs is that children under age 10 or 11 are naturally anti-drug, and that reinforcing this attitude may be easier than trying to stop children who've already experimented with drugs or alcohol. Today, millions of federal prevention dollars are supporting the Just Say No concept, paying for this rock video, for instance. Just Say No aims at stopping any drug experimentation on the grounds that the surest way to prevent anyone from abusing drugs is to prevent everybody from using. Director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Dr. Robert Schuster.
We're often asked whether or not experimental use of drugs is not just a natural part of growing up. Kids are obviously inquisitive, they like to try new things, they like to have new experiences and so forth. And after all, they do a variety of things. They ski, they take risks in a variety of ways. Why not drugs? Well, the answer for me is very simple, and that is that, first of all, a certain percentage of the kids who initiate drug use are going to go on to compulsive use and addicted use of those drugs. Their lives will be seriously, if not permanently, affected by this. And we can't predict, at this point, with great accuracy, which of those kids it's going to be. So it's a game of Russian roulette. If you start initiating experimental drug use, you don't know whether you're going to be one of the people that can handle it, or you're going to be able to walk away from it, or whether you're going to find the experience so overwhelming that you want to just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
Though it's at the heart of the Just Say No approach, this argument is a hard one to sell to children. Determined to try is retired businessman Otto Moulton.
I think one of the greatest things that's happened in this country in the last year is the Say No clubs. Now, that's wonderful, but we've got to also give them the reasons why just to say no to drug use. And the key, in my opinion, is good education.
Moulton once coached Little League and saw kids lose interest when they started smoking marijuana. He decided to give up his business and now goes from school to school helping kids understand why drugs can hook you.
All right, now, I want to tell you the day one problem associated really with all psychoactive drugs, okay, is that they cause chemical imbalances in the brain. And if you mess with your brains are going to get even with you. Would you agree with that? I think that makes sense. Now, I'm going to draw on the blackboard only to demonstrate to you, okay? Now, we have a neocortex, we have a core brain, and we have a limbic system. Now, in the limbic system, there's an area called the septum, and the septum is the pleasure center. How many of you like chocolate cake and ice cream? Raise your hand. Now, I like chocolate cake and ice cream, and how can you tell I like chocolate cake and ice cream? Yeah, too big, right? And I got to do something about that. Truth. When we eat chocolate cake and ice cream, or when we do something that makes us feel good, the messages are coming from that area of the brain. All right? Now, what happens to people that get into drugs in the beginning? What do you think happens?
It sends a message to your pleasure center, and it goes off.
That's exactly right. You know, a few years ago, there was a very famous comedian that unfortunately he died of an overdose of what they call a speedball. That's a combination of heroin and cocaine. And you see, Mr. Bellucci, what happened to him is that he kept hitting his reward system or his pleasure center with drugs to the point where the drugs took over his personality. And this is usually what happens to these people. The drugs are the only thing that they want to do. They get disinterested in almost everything else. Okay, what's the answer to drugs?
No!
Or just say no. Thank you very much.
But telling kids why to say no still may not be enough. So in this Seattle school, children are taught how to say no. how to resist pressure from their peers.
Here's my friend Missy. She's going to ask me to do something that could get me in trouble. I'm going to think out loud while we're doing it for you so you know exactly where we're at.
Hey, Nancy, after school, you want to meet me out behind the portable?
Oh, you know, sometimes when Missy asks me to meet her behind the portable, it's no big deal. But sometimes Missy asks me to do things that could get me into trouble. So I'm going to ask her a couple questions. What do you have in mind, Missy?
I got these cigarettes that our mom's purse this morning.
Missy, that's smoking. I'm going to tell her the name of that trouble. I'm going to go on to step 2. You know, Missy, that's against school rules.
No, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm going to go right on to step 3, and I'm going to tell Missy what could happen if I get caught. You know what, Miss? If we got caught here on school grounds, we'd probably get suspended.
Oh, really?
That'd be a bummer.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on to step 4, and I'm going to tell her something that's an alternative. Listen, it's recess time. Let's go play Foursquare. I'll challenge you. Want to go?
You can beat me?
Yeah,
Okay,
no sweat.
All right.
Okay, how's that look? Not too bad? Think you guys can do that?
Yeah.
This 5-step formula for resisting peer pressure is based on a technique that's been successful in preventing cigarette smoking in children.
Hey, I wanted to know if you wanted to go to the store with me.
What are we gonna do?
Get some candy.
Do you have any money?
No, we could just take it.
That's shoplifting.
Well, see, my mom has this collection of bottled wine and stuff.
Peer resistance formulas have now been widely adopted in school drug prevention programs and are being promoted by the new Federal Office on Drug Prevention. But whether they work in helping children say no when friends offer drugs and alcohol is still unclear.
So why don't we just go over and get up a kickball game?
Okay.
Super. Outstanding.
Dr. Robert Schuster.
I think the evidence for it is mixed. I think that there's no question that there is some positive evidence that this can be effective, but I think we still have a long way to go. I think the idea is a good one. Translating that into meaningful action that a child can engage in when their best friend says, hey, you want to do drugs with me, is a very difficult proposition because that kind of pressure is very strong.
This raises one of the central questions in drug prevention. Tens of millions of dollars are being spent on a variety of prevention approaches. This curriculum being packaged in a Seattle warehouse is one of the more elaborate, involving lessons for kindergarten through 12th grade. Yet little is known about whether this approach, or any of the others, including Just Say No, actually works.
When it comes to prevention activities, we oftentimes fly by the seat of our pants. We really don't know whether what we're doing is good, bad, or indifferent.
That it might actually be bad is a lesson learned the hard way.
Hey, kiddies, gather round. The man with the goodies is here.
This public service announcement was made in the early 1970s as part of President Nixon's war on drugs.
Isn't it true that sniffing glue can damage your liver and kidneys?
Cool it, kid. Looky. Amphetamines, bennies, dexies, meth.
They say amphetamines can cause something like schizophrenia.
Over $1 billion was spent in just a few years to give children straight, factual information on drugs.
Neato, nice, easy down.
I think in the early days of prevention, where we were attempting to simply give children factual information about the drugs, what is the name of the drug? What actions does it have on the body? What possible toxic effects does it have? And so forth. Given that information in sort of a straight scientific sense, it really didn't have an impact on their behavior. All it did was say, okay, well, you know all these things about drugs, and in a sense, we almost told them how to avoid the toxicity. In fact, we found that it increased people's interest in and their drug use. So that sort of clinical, scientific approach, without any value judgment about it, really failed, backfired on us.
Today, prevention campaigns take the Madison Avenue approach, slogans and celebrities instead of detailed information. So making drug use unfashionable has become no different from selling merchandise, at least to the owners of a successful New York clothing company.
The apparel industry is one that dictates to the entire population how wide your tie should be, whether you should wear a wide lapel or a narrow lapel, whether women's skirts should be long or short. And that gave us the impetus to decide, if we're able to do that as an industry, why can't we talk people out of trying drugs?
You're going to lie, you're going to cheat, you're going to steal, you're going to do anything you have to. That's what cocaine does to you. then scratch out this and say, I know. That's what it did to me.
Country and Western singer Larry Gatlin, an ex-addict, is about to make a television commercial for members only, warning people not to make the same mistake he did in using cocaine. The company is paying for the commercial in response to President Reagan's call for individuals and business to enlist in the crusade against drugs.
It's a way of us paying back to the public the success that they gave to us. And we feel that we owe them something, and in our very small way, we feel very positive and excited about it.
You get up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you just feel a little bit better than you did before we got into this. It's a terrific feeling.
Members Only is spending its entire television advertising budget for 16 months on a series of anti-drug messages.
Scene 101, sound 1, action. This is for anyone tempted to fool around with cocaine. Your money's going to run out before your habit does. Then what? You're going to lie, you're going to cheat, you're going to steal. You're going to do whatever you have to. That's what cocaine does to you. I know, that's what it did to me. I was just one guitar strum away from wrecking my whole life. I was a real messed up cowboy. Don't let anyone or anything push you into doing cocaine. Just say no.
I think we have to be very careful in some of the mass media advertising we do, where we show people who have used drugs and have recovered. They now look healthy, reasonably wealthy, and they say, well, I was on death's door and now I've recovered. There's a mixed message there. For the non-user, it says, well, gee, I could try it, and, if I get in trouble, I'll just stop and I'll be like this guy and recover from it. That's a danger. But on the other hand, for those people who are currently using drugs, perhaps in an abusive fashion that they're really getting in trouble with them, seeing that person can also act as a model saying, hey, it is possible to get out of what I'm doing. So we're not clear. I think that for different audiences, it may have different effects.
In the face of this uncertainty about what works and what doesn't, communities across the country continue to experiment with their own drug prevention strategies. In Linfield, Massachusetts, for instance, a group of high school juniors and seniors, including class presidents, a football star, and the cheerleading captain, have been organized by parents who believe it's not enough just to say no. Helene Naiman.
We don't believe in preaching to kids, don't do this, don't do that. What we want the kids to do is make responsible decisions, and I emphasize the word responsible, so that they aren't forced to make a decision based on fear, but a decision would be that they would make based on self-knowledge.
The student group is called PEP, Peers Educating Peers. Its members have been chosen because they are among the student leaders in the high school. Today, they are heading for a retreat session in the country. Throughout the day, they'll be challenged by a professional counselor to explore and express their feelings.
Okay, lock arms, guys.
The day begins with an exercise designed to build trust.
Body's back. Body's back. 2, 3, go. See?
Right.
Go. Go.
Oh, that was good. Come down.
We're going to do a real simple exercise. All we're going to do is go from one person to the next and look right in their eye and say, no. That's it. Just no. Right in the eye, no.
No. No. No. No. No. No. No.
No. No. No. No. No. No. No.
Okay, we'll stop it right here. are you crying about right now?
I made her say no to like Treasure and Casey. I can't say no to them. They're my friend.
You say no to yourself. You can't say it to other people. You can't come out and say no.
Why not?
I don't know. I just take it. You say no and you wonder what they're gonna think, what people are gonna think. And you don't want to even risk it. I'm afraid of if I say no, I can't be specific, but if I say no, I'm gonna lose something. I'm gonna lose what I have with that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's like my biggest fear.
I think that's pretty common. I really do. We're afraid we're not going to be liked. We want to be liked. Let's all say it. I want to be liked. Let's hear it. Say it.
I want to be
I want to be liked.
Say it again.
I want to be liked.
Say it again. Say it louder.
I want to be liked.
Damn right. I think the more honest sharing of feelings that children and adolescents have an opportunity to do, the less they will abuse drugs. How soon after your mother's death did your father remarry?
Like 2 years after.
So pretty soon?
Yeah, and I was the little brat who resented her. I feel like I'm keeping a low profile.
A major aim of the session is to get students to talk openly about what troubles them.
She'll wake me up in the morning and say, get up and do laundry. And it's like, I just do it. I'm a robot. I just get up and do it. And I don't say, so many times I would just feel like saying, couldn't you say hello?
No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Wait a minute. Okay.
I think
This situation
that, releasing your feelings is a really good form of prevention, because why would you want to start drinking if when you think of alcohol or drugs, and when you think of an alcoholic, you think of someone who's trying to escape their life, whatever's going on in their life, any little problem, and then as their disease develops, it's anything they need to escape, they do by alcohol. So if you don't have to escape anything, if you know that you like yourself and you know that your body's clean of, bad feelings or bad emotions, then you're not going to have to escape. You don't have anything to run away from.
Besides learning to express themselves, PEP members also learn how to counsel others, to help peers share their feelings.
What's your conflict? Or what's bothering you?
All right. So what makes you a wise guy?
Like if someone rags on me or something.
Today, PEP is visiting with 8th graders in the middle school.
I wouldn't walk away. I would just stay there and get in a fight with the kid.
Once you really learn to know yourself and learn to like yourself, you feel like you don't have to do that stuff. You know what I mean? You'll be satisfied with how you feel.
As with the other prevention strategies, it's not clear what influence PEP will have. Many of the PEP counselors have had their own experiences with drugs or alcohol, and like most of society, make a distinction between using responsibly and abusing.
I think that it's okay for people to drink when they can shut themselves off, when they don't, when they know that once they're getting their effective buzz or whatever, then they can stop. But I don't think people should drink if they're not going to be able to know when to stop. And marijuana, I think, is the same.
A couple beers here, once in a while. Everybody has a couple beers once in a while. It's all right. Because, it's just, sometimes it makes a person feel good just to have a couple of beers. But when you're drinking, every night, or you're drinking... If you get drunk, every weekend, I think that's... Or you get, couple nights a week, and I think that's abusing.
I've seen too many people make fools out of themselves and hurt themselves to stand it. And I think if PEP could teach kids that you don't have to do that to be popular or to have someone like you, that's what I'd like to see done. Some people get a good feeling out of having it be Monday morning
and people saying, oh, you're pretty trash Friday night. Some people like that, but in the back of their mind, they must be thinking, I really made a jerk out of myself, you know?
PEP members don't pass on a message that responsible use is okay, but neither do they say never use, which is perhaps why PEP is more popular than the East Greenwich Soda Group. The parents who set up PEP would prefer their children not to use at all, but are more concerned with preventing occasional use from sliding into addiction. This less than hardline approach, however, isn't favored by federal officials.
Back in the 1970s, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, of which I'm the director, actually talked about responsible drug use. They talked about teaching people to use drugs in a responsible fashion. I think that was a mistake, because if we accept responsible drug use and only talk about drug abuse, that is where people are using too much of the drug or at a high enough dosage that they're getting into trouble with it, we open ourselves up to a use of the drugs by millions, if not hundreds of millions of people in the population, and we can't control that.
The president uses the word zero tolerance for drugs, and by that he means that this little bit of drug use, we argued with a number of words for the last 25 years. We talked about things like responsible use of drugs, which meant a little bit was okay long as you didn't run into trouble. We talked about mild drugs and hard drugs as if these drugs wouldn't really cause you great difficulty. We talked about victimless crime, like somebody who uses drugs as long as he keeps it to himself, as if that were possible, doesn't cause problems. I think what we realize now is that our society, and our society is, in the president's words, the workplace and the schools, is infected with this plague of the 1980s. And the only way to eliminate it is to eliminate all the carriers. Use, I mean, we're not trying to limit people.
There's no middle ground. Indifference is not an option. For the sake of our children, I implore each of you to be even more unyielding and inflexible as you continue your crusade against drugs.
And so the federally approved crusade against drugs continues to focus on creating public intolerance toward drug use as the only sure path to prevention. But at the University of Washington in Seattle, drug prevention researchers are concerned that this approach misses the root causes of abuse. David Hawkins.
The point is that if you just try to deal with drug abuse as an isolated phenomenon, we're just stamping out drug abuse, you're going to miss the fact that it's related to lots of other problems that a number of young people have. You've got to look at the whole picture. What goes wrong as young people develop to lead some children into antisocial behaviors that cost themselves, their families, and society incredibly.
Looking at the whole picture of why some children get into trouble with drugs is what Hawkins and his colleague Richard Catalano have been attempting to do. They've compared the histories of people who became drug and alcohol abusers with the histories of people who didn't, looking for common threads in their lives which might explain the difference. Their research included interviews with young drug abusers getting treatment.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up for you? What was life like at home?
It was pretty painful. A lot of things.
What emerged was a picture of things going wrong in children's lives that were often beyond the control of the children themselves.
My daddy used to drink off and on, and you could kind of say he's an alcoholic. And my dad would go out and get drunk, and he'd come home and start yelling at us. He'd find something to yell at us for. And things got thrown around the house.
Having a parent who abused drugs or alcohol, or not having clear family rules prohibiting drugs and alcohol, seemed to put kids at high risk for becoming abusers. So did failing in elementary school.
A whole year, he just kept giving me F's on all my report cards, Mm-hmm. I mean, I did most of the work before he started acting this way, all the time. And every quarter, he gave me F's, and I had 56 F's the whole year.
56 F's?
Yeah, he put a big red F on the front of the report card, last one.
How did that make you feel?
The question is whether children with life histories like these will in any way be helped by approaches like Just Say No.
I think these broad, widespread efforts to change the social norms and values about alcohol use or about drug use will probably have some beneficial effects on reducing casual drug use among a broad range of students, I'm not sure that they will affect those children who are at the highest risk of drug abuse very much. Because if you look at children who have high rates of school failure, high rates of antisocial behavior, don't care about school, alienated from family and school, etc., those children are not always so responsive to what President Reagan has to say. Or if you're starting a Just Say No club in their school, it's not clear to me that they will sign up and join the Just Say No club.
It's too late now for these young drug abusers to be helped by any prevention strategy. But what if their childhoods could have been different? In 18 Seattle elementary schools, an experiment's going on to see if it's possible to prevent certain problems at school and home, and if so, whether that reduces drug abuse. The experiment will last 12 years and cost $2 million. Half the experiment concerns teachers, retraining them to teach in ways that involve even the kids who usually don't do well in class. In this 5th grade class, for instance, the teacher is trying to get every child to participate actively in the lesson.
Go, number 1, everyone.
Camouflage.
Go.
Omnivore.
Go.
Herbivore.
Go.
Carnivore.
Go.
Hibernate.
And what is it?
Predators.
And?
Prey.
Okay. Point time, we
The teacher has also organized her class into groups, mixed to include fast and slow learners, the misfits, and the well-behaved.
Tomorrow afternoon, Miss Lindsay and I will have figured out which group has earned the greatest number of points this week. Dynamite ending. Friday morning, Polaroid picture of your group. Your group alone displayed downstairs beside the office door. All right, go to work with your group. Let's roll it.
When the children work as a team, the group gets only 1 grade, so everyone must help each other.
Wait. Number 5 isn't wrong? Oh, me. Oh, erase that. Jason, erase.
The hope is that all students will learn better,
Predators or during the winter.
and that the well-behaved kids will have a strong social influence on the troublemakers. The children in these experimental classrooms will be followed through high school to compare their rate of drug abuse with children taught in conventional classrooms. But the experiment isn't just retraining teachers. Parents also have to go back to school.
What does it mean as they become adolescents? It means they become more independent. They begin to think even more for themselves. They want to stand on their own 2 feet. They want to make sure that we know they're different from them, that they're their own people.
In a series of seminars, Hawkins is trying to change the way parents raise their children. He started 5 years ago, teaching these parents how to reward and punish their 7-year-olds. Now that the children are entering their teens, Hawkins is helping the parents deal directly with the issue of drug experimentation.
I'd like to ask you to talk with your neighbor at your table about your own views about this issue, teenagers and alcohol and other drugs. What do you think is right for kids to do?
It's a child's decision. You can tell them, this is what I would like, or this is what I expect, and this is what will happen if you do. But it's going to be their decision.
I would explain it to my daughter, asked her, then she wouldn't be able to be that famous track player that she wants to be one day if she started using alcohol.
It's probably the toughest job we have, raising children, and yet nowhere are we trained to do this. And so the skills that I picked up from my parents are great, but they might not help me in dealing with possibility of drug abuse in my family because that wasn't such a big issue a few generations ago. And so I think, although we'd like to assume that parents all know how to do it, the evidence is that we can all learn to do a better job at parenting. Think about this now. We're adults. Some of us smoke. Some of us drink alcohol. Some of us may even use other substances, okay? Do we as parents have a right to have a different set of expectations for ourselves and for our children? What do people think?
I feel that when you say kids can't and you can, it gives them the impression that, oh, I can't wait till I get 21 because I can drink. And so I feel that it should be something that no one can do.
Are you willing to live with that?
I'm willing to try very hard, but
My wife and I do enjoy an occasional glass of wine. Right. Now, we don't get drunk. We don't drink when we drive at all.
Yeah.
But I think if you have mature enough children, the likelihood of them abusing later on is greater if they have seen their parents for years drink some wine and never be allowed to go near this forbidden fruit than if in moderation, I never offer it, I never tell them to go to the refrigerator and get it,
Right.
but if they say, Daddy, can I have a sip? Yes.
The most important thing is that parents feel...
Hawkins' research shows that most people who become substance abusers tried drugs or alcohol before age 15. So his aim here is to persuade parents of the need to set firm rules against early drug experimentation.
I want to give you some examples of some rules that different families have set, not because this is what you should...
Hawkins hopes that if parents can be taught how to make and enforce family rules, they'll be more comfortable telling their children no.
This first one says, we agree, no alcohol, no drugs, no tobacco, no exceptions. And the consequences, if that's violated, are also clear. The first time you're grounded for a month, no allowance for 3 months. That's very clear. Frequently, parents who are particularly concerned about alcohol and other drugs say, look, if I ever catch you with drugs, you're out of this house, young man. It's fine to have that kind of an expectation if that's what you really mean. But what happens the first time you find your child with a can of beer hidden someplace or with a pack of cigarettes? If you don't mean to follow through on the consequence, don't set it.
It will be many years before Hawkins knows if trying to change children's home and school environments is actually useful in preventing drug and alcohol abuse. The whole approach could prove worthless. Little comfort for the mothers and fathers here, whose children are about to enter an age when drug experimentation becomes commonplace. Yet Hawkins believes research like this is necessary, because he's convinced preventing drug abuse will take much more than a say-no crusade.
It's important for people to take an approach that's based on knowledge. What do we know about the problem and things that add to the risk of there being serious problems, and address those factors? Not just go off with our gut reaction doing something that we believe is going to make a difference because it's right. The problem here is that we do have a behavior, the abuse of drugs, that can wreak all kinds of havoc with lives, that can hurt people a lot. It's also a behavior that's all tied up with certain people's morality, with ethics and morals and right and wrong and good and bad and everything else. And so it gets very complicated, and sometimes people advocate solutions in this area that are less based on what we know and more based on just a set of personal beliefs.
In fact, almost everything being done in prevention today is based on personal beliefs. The government-backed crusade to create a new attitude of intolerance for drugs and alcohol, conceived by activist parent groups, is itself largely untested, and like drug prevention programs of the past, could have unintended consequences. The crusade is in many ways a new round in the traditional battle for autonomy between teenagers and their parents. What's different today, when drugs and alcohol have become so pervasive, is that the stakes are much higher.
It has been 6 months since President Reagan declared war on drugs, 4 months since Congress responded by passing the $3 billion anti-drug bill. Now, in his 1988 budget, the president is recommending cuts of nearly $1 billion from drug education, enforcement, and prevention programs. I hope you'll join us again next week for Frontline. I'm Judy Woodruff. Good night.
Next on Frontline, they helped put the first American on the moon. Did they also help commit Nazi war crimes?
They contributed a great deal to put the first man on the moon.
German scientists were brought to the U.S. at the end of World War II to start the American space program. Did we ignore their past? Watch The Nazi Connection, next on Frontline.
or a transcript of this program, please send $4 to Frontline, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH, Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Frontline was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Schools, colleges, and other organizations interested in purchasing or renting video cassettes of this program may call 800-424-7963 or write PBS Video, Post Office Box 8092, Washington, D.C. 20024.